This podcast does not provide medical advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies. I'm Marianne Matzo.
And I am Charlie Navarrette.
So, everybody, go grab yourself a piece of cake. This is medicinal cake. Death by chocolate. Can't listen to a death podcast if you're not eating death by chocolate or something else that's equally bad for you. Get yourself your favorite drink. And let's see, Charlie, what are you eating?
Well, I do have, this chocolate cake is going to kill me. So it's a 2-layer chocolate cake, homemade from a local bakery. Frosting is just great. Yeah.
Do you need to be alone for a minute?
Yes. So from a local bakery, everything is homemade. It's cool. It's been refrigerated. So when you take it home, or when I take it home, I always just let it sit out on the counter almost to room temperature before I enjoy it.
Melt all the fat that's in it so that you can taste every calorie.
That's the reason why. So I had to decide I would have a glass of milk with it, and almost out of milk. So unfortunately, then I had to choose.
First world problems you have.
Yeah. So
what are you going to drink?
Well, I had to choose either between bourbon or whiskey, and I decided to go with the whiskey.
Ah, excellent choice.
So what do you have?
I have Diet Pepsi, 0 sugar.
Oh, to go with that 0-calorie cake. Okay.
Yes, and fantasies of death by chocolate.
Oh.
But I love recipes, and I have a recipe for our listeners that Sandy can post on the our webpage. It's death by chocolate cake. So everybody make it and tell me how good it is.
Can I just go and buy another, please? Okay, yeah, I'll be sure I'll do my homework, and I'll make it too.
Yeah, I can see this in your small New York apartment.
Yes.
I don't think so. So, Charlie, there's a saying when you're teaching in college that those who can do, those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach do research. And when I was thinking about...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I heard what I learned was those who can't teach gym.
Yes, that's true. If I guess you're high school, grade school.
Yeah.
But in college, they don't let anybody teach gym, so there you have it. So when I was thinking about how to introduce myself to our listeners, I thought, well, I think it's probably an important thing to know that the people that are talking to you about this pretty delicate subject have degrees in the area. I've written a book on palliative care nursing that's in its, I think, 5th edition now. I've been a nurse for 44 years, have a PhD in gerontology. But all throughout that, I always worked as a nurse because that is really where my heart has been, is taking care of people. And so and then when I kind of got toward the end of my career, probably about the last 5 years before I retired, I went to full-time taking care of patients, working in oncology. And that just really kind of got me back to where I felt comfortable, where I felt like I was contributing. And it, I think, makes me a better teacher to be able to say, here are the clinical situations I've been in. Here's the problems that we face in this, healthcare environment. So that's what I've done for the last 44 years. What have you been doing, Charlie?
Well, initially I started in New York acting. Some local plays, here in the city. Went on a few national tours.
National tours of what?
Man of La Mancha. The last thing I did was City of Angels. It was a musical, and I played detective.
Columbo?
Yeah, that's right, Detective Columbo. No, Lieutenant. Well, the lieutenant. But by this time, I had gotten married, and my wonderful son was born. And spending 4-6 months on the road with a newborn just wasn't going to cut it.
No, I can see that.
So I hung up my tutu and ballet slippers and found as my parents like to say, a real job. Working as a paralegal in a law office. We specialized in asbestos. Well, not specializing in asbestos, rather asbestos bankruptcy cases. Eventually, I was told by the powers that be to leave my desk and go out and interview people who were dying from mesothelioma. Marianne, are you familiar with mesothelioma?
Well, I am, but I'm not sure our listeners are, so why don't you tell us both?
Basically, it is a cancer, and you get this cancer from exposure to asbestos. And you die. There's no cure for it. So I began to interview people literally dying to gather the information so we could represent them in court. And from the beginning, first client, this gentleman was in an oxygen tank, real bad shape. Said, Charlie, I'll give you like $200 if you'll just pull the plug. And
wow.
And I said, I'm sorry, I can't. I can't do it for less than $500. and it was great. His wife looked at me horrified and then just started to laugh. And then he started to laugh. And it just made everything normal, which is what you and I are working on. It's just to normalize the process of death and dying.
Well, we've been trying to be normal all our lives.
Yeah, that hasn't always worked. And the thing of it was, with each patient, each client, really had a question about a will, about a healthcare proxy, wills, estates. What information I didn't have, I would find out about it, and I would have them contact someone at the law office. But I became well educated about end-of-life issues and what people were going through. And so here I am with you.
Well, and what a good combo. Charlie and I have known each other since we were, 21?
When I was 21.
I should have known better than to say that.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, actually about that, yes.
Yeah. And we're not 21 anymore.
No. Not for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
But it's good.
So we've been wanting to work together because we worked together when we were 21 at the University of Michigan. And all these years later, we've finally back to where we started, Charlie. Working together.
Yeah. But no.
Curb your enthusiasm.
Yeah, curb my enthusiasm.
Try not to hyperventilate.
No, but I'm just thinking hopefully, well, not hopefully, but, wiser, more experienced. Yeah. Yes. So
we are, did I tell you what we're going to talk about today?
No.
We're going to talk about today. Well, I'm going to talk about today. Why do people die? And so for our second half of our program, we're going to do a little bit of an exploration of why do people die? So for our second half, we're going to talk about why do people die? I mean, really, if we had a choice, most of us would probably choose not to die. But
yeah, but are people creative enough and interested in things enough to, remain active and interested for another 50 years?
Well,
like
that assumes that they're interested and active now, right? I mean, how many people do you see that, kind of fritter away their life thinking it's going to last forever?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, human beings are built to eventually die. We're not built to last forever. But all throughout history, people have wondered, well, why do we have to die? So some people have sort of a religious view. It's seen as a punishment for sin. The idea being that all people die because they all sin. It goes back to Adam and Eve and God being annoyed about that apple and said, now you're mortal, now you sin, now you'll die. Other religions, Islamic scholars and within Christianity too, have this vision of a judgment day, that everybody tastes death and you'll be judged by how evil or how good you are. It wasn't until probably around the time of Galileo that there was this view that maybe death was something that we could control, that with science, we could figure out how not to die. And there were many scientists who tried all kinds of different things, starvation, being packed in snow, to try to avoid dying. But it didn't work. Everybody died. Science gave us penicillin and C-sections for babies who get stuck on the way out, immunizations. All of those things can help prevent death for a time, but none of those things make us immortal. So we can put it off, but we can't put it off forever.
Exactly. You can run, but you can't hide.
That's it. Within Buddhism and Hinduism, there's this idea about reincarnation, that, you die, but you come back, and you come back in your next life. And what and how you come back in the next life is based on how you act now. And so, I've seen people, Hindus, who will at the end of life not take their pain medicine, for example, because they want to suffer as much as they can in this life, so that when they come back in their next life, they're in a better position. So that kind of accounts or gives us a reason for why we might be suffering in this life, is so that we can have a better life the next time around, depending on your religious views. So all throughout human history, we've had issues with bad sanitation. And of course, we didn't have immunizations. We had poor nutrition. But in the United States, that started changing around 1910. And we have started having a lot more older people, in the last 25, 30 years, not for any other reason except that they didn't die when they were born. They didn't die in childbirth. Those are the things that will impact whether or not we're able to live to old age.
And what do you attribute that to?
Well, to science. Because around 1910, World War I period, there were increases in better sanitation. People were washing their hands before they went to help women give birth. Nutrition improved. So these are factors that contributed to that period of time beginning to lower the infant mortality rate. By the time us baby boomers came around, they kind of had that down to a pretty good science. We had, going to get our immunizations. And I can remember in kindergarten, them lining us up and giving us, I don't know what it was, whichever one it was, but giving us our shots in school, because that was part of the immunization process. Understanding about what foods were good for you and what foods were not good for you. And having enough money and enough access to good food so that kids ate well. The other piece of it, again, is that they didn't die while they were being born. There was better obstetrical care. Women survived. The baby survived. And then we're all here to be able to grow old. So prior to about 1900, the infant mortality rate was really, really high. And over time, like I said, through the Industrial Revolution, conditions changed and the babies survived. In the early 1900s, there were a wide range of improvements that were bringing the mortality rate down. There was central heating so that the babies were no longer exposed to icy drafts, clean drinking water, better food, healthier moms, better hygiene, cheaper clothing meant that there was clothing for infants. More babies were born in hospitals, where they actually washed their hands and cleaned up afterwards. And then, as I said, antibiotics and vaccinations. So, in 1900, the infant mortality rate was there were 165 babies died per 1,000 births. So when they talk about infant mortality, what they're looking at is how many died per how many births. In 2017, the infant mortality rate was 5.8 per 1,000 births. So it went down from 165 to 5.8, which means then, of course, you're going to have an increase in survival and in longevity, meaning how long you'll live. The vaccinations by about 2000, they had pretty much eliminated diphtheria, pertussis, and measles. Now, those things are making a comeback because parents have stopped vaccinating. And they've stopped.
Why?
Well, they stopped vaccinating because they thought that certain vaccines were causing illness or death or autism in their children. And there was one study by a physician who documented that children with immunizations were more likely to be autistic. That study has been debunked over and over again. The physician actually lost his license, and he admitted that he made up the numbers, that he falsified those numbers. But people don't believe that. They believe the original research, the original publication, even though the author and the scientists associated with that said, I falsified those data. So, and also, you also hear people saying, I don't want the government telling me what I'm going to do with my kids. There's a lot of kind of reasons, but the fact is that those diseases are on an uptick because of people not vaccinating their kids. We can also, so as I said, life expectancy is how long from birth you're expected to live. So for white women, life expectancy at birth was 51 years in 1900. So if I was born in 1900, I'd be dead a while by now. But it has increased to 81.1 years as of 2016. So,
and there's a little something there for the men?
Well, there's a little, very, very little something. So for the white men, life expectancy in 1900 was 48 years. And it's gone up to 76.1 in 2017. And the difference between, and these are just looking at white men and white women, it's different for black men and black women. It's different for Hispanic men and Hispanic women because race plays a part in our life expectancy. Gender plays a part in our life expectancy. Also, wealth. If you're poor, your life expectancy is lower than if you have a lot of money. And you can just extrapolate that very logically in that when you have money, you have access to better health care. You can afford to buy vitamins. You can afford to have better food to eat. Yeah. Live in a cleaner part of town, so you have less pollution. Think of where we grew up around Detroit. If you lived in downtown Detroit, around the auto plants and all of that, it didn't smell so good, right? Remember that?
Right. Yeah, of course. That makes sense. Sure.
And they used to be able to light what was the river they used to be able to light on fire? Do you remember that?
The Rouge River.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say the Rouge River, but I didn't want to say the bad. Yeah, they used to light that on fire. Yeah, they kind of.
I know nothing.
They kind of cleaned it up since then, but that was how we grew up. I mean, we could drive through this one section town. Remember, it would smell so bad, downriver there. Oh man, it was awful. So if you're living around those areas, then that's going to shave some years off of your life expectancy. Diet, nutrition, like we were growing up. I mean, my mother was not, didn't cut back on the butter or anything like that. Man, we ate really well. And as time went on, she discovered margarine and all kinds of other things to keep the fat content down and the sugar content down. It wasn't nearly as good as it was when we were growing up. I mean, White Castles. Yeah. Did you go out for White Castles as a kid?
Oh, once in a while. Yes. Yes.
Well, that was like maybe a twice a year treat when I was growing up, but man, those were good. But
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Evil Forest. God, I could do with a White Castle, couldn't you?
Actually, yes.
I know, huh? Well, but anyway, we're going to live forever because we don't eat White Castles anymore. Actually, that's not true. Nobody lives forever. The body is really built to live to about 120 years. Beyond that, we don't have replacement parts. It just really is a sort of a wear and tear issue, is that your body just can't continue to survive past that. But if somebody was going to ask you, what are the reasons that you die? Why do humans die? Why do things die? There's really three reasons. One is that you're very, very old. And especially when I talk to children about this, I always make sure I say very, very, because lots of people are old, including you. No,
Thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Well, you're older than me. Anyway,
yes.
So very, very old is very, very old. It's not, no, I'm not very, very old. I might be very old, but I'm not very, very old. So that's an important kind of piece to put in there when you're talking to kids. The second reason is very, very sick. So physically sick. You can think of in terms of like the coronavirus. People can get to that point where their lungs are so badly damaged from the virus that they're very, very sick. And a lot of people don't survive because it's past that point where they can return and recover. So again, everybody gets sick, but not everybody's very, very sick. And then the second reason is very, very hurt, physically hurt, damaged, hit by a car, hit by a truck. You get the idea. And when my kids were little, I framed it for them that way. And when my sister died, they were in pre-K and kindergarten. And I said, Aunt Joan was very, very sick. This is what happened to her. And I can remember the little one looking at me and saying, well, are you very, very sick? I said, no, I'm not very, very sick. I'm really healthy. Now, that was probably an exaggeration, but I wasn't sick and I wasn't very, very sick. And, now they're in their 20s and they will still use those terms. And I'll say, oh, so-and-so's really not doing well. Well, are they very, very sick? Yeah. If somebody is, yeah, they're very, very sick. And that's the way that we communicate about it. Children can understand that. It's a common kind of language that we can use amongst ourselves. People do die. Everybody dies. And it's okay to talk about it. It's part of that circle of life. It's far better than, in the old days when somebody would be diagnosed with cancer or something and nobody would talk about it. They'd whisper about it. They'd hide it. Yeah. And that wasn't healthy for the person who has work to do in terms of saying goodbye to their family and loved ones. And it's not good for the loved ones to not be able to say goodbye if you're hiding those facts. So what do you think? Do you got any questions?
Not so much a question, but yeah, I mean, I've just seen. Actually, I was just thinking about a movie called The Farewell. Did you see it? It was out last year.
No, who's in that?
Is it, what is her stage name? Aquafina.
Oh, I've heard of her. Yeah.
Yeah, very funny woman. But in this role, so she's a Chinese American, and she receives a message that her grandmother, who lives in China, and actually all of her family lives in China, is dying, and that she should, come home to see her grandma. Mm-hmm. So she gets there, and just as you were describing about not telling people their condition, apparently this is the culture. I don't know if it's throughout China, but it gave the impression that yes, a person is not told that they are sick. Mm-hmm. They are not told. When I say sick to the point that they are dying.
Very, very sick.
And yeah, very, very sick, yes. So, and that is the conflict because Aquafina's character has become Americanized. Ah. And she wants to tell her grandma because she also wants to say goodbye to her. Mm-hmm. But the family is absolutely against it. The doctor, as a matter of practice, is not going to say anything to her, to the grandmother. Mm-hmm. X-rays. I think what it is, the X-rays show that she has a problem, but then when they show the grandmother the X-rays, it's someone else's X-rays. And this just goes on for the length of the movie. I don't want to say how it ends because if you haven't seen it, I do recommend it. It's a very good film. Okay. But that's what was going through my mind when you were saying that.
It must have been frustrating to watch.
It was. It just, yeah. I just again, you and I are from a time when that was still common in America. Mm-hmm. Not to tell someone either how sick they are or it just wasn't an open discussion. I've seen enough situations where it's still not a completely open discussion, but at least it's more acceptable. Mm-hmm. And actually nowadays more people expect it. People just want to be told the truth. But oftentimes you're left to the devices of, a doctor's or a nurse's own issues.
Or your own family's issues, right?
Or that's true too. Yeah.
If I don't have to know that if you don't have to know that you're dying, then I don't have to act like you're dying. And then we can all pretend that everything's hunky-dory.
Pretend that everything's all right. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Well, thanks for listening to me chat about that, Charlie. And I think we can go on to our third half. We have a new segment called In Flagrante Delicto Morto. That is a Latin phrase that's defined as someone being caught during the act of a crime or a sexual act. So the flagrante delicto is that being caught in the act, and the morto part is dying. So in other words, this section is about people who die during sex or other illegal acts. And with us today, we have Charlie Delicto, who is reporting. Charlie?
Hi. It's still me. Marianne, do you know the original meaning of flagrante delicto or in flagrante delicto?
Original other than the Latin?
No. Well, going back to the Latin, it started out as a legal term, which a literal translation means in blazing offense. Nowadays, in contemporary English, we just simply say that someone is caught red-handed. But aside from its legal meaning, In Flagrante is used as a euphemism for being caught doing something you really shouldn't be doing, especially something sexual. And because this show always takes the high road, let's look at In Flagrante regarding death during sex.
I can't wait. I'm holding my breath, my little breath.
So, are you familiar with the phrase kiss of death?
Well, yes.
Okay. So generally speaking, people think of movies or books, and where it signifies that a member of a crime family will be killed for some sort of betrayal.
Mm-hmm.
That's what usually comes to mind for folks. I mean, think of Michael Corleone kissing his brother Fredo when Michael discovers his brother betrayed him to the family's rival.
Right. Is that the one that involved a fish?
What?
It didn't involve a fish.
Actually, that was in Godfather 1. And Abe Vigoda, and I don't remember the character's name, but Abe Vigoda, who played Fish in Barney Miller, he was talking with James Caan. James Caan opened a package, and in the package was a fish.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what is this? He didn't understand what this meant. And Abe Vigoda told him, it's I think that it was an old Sicilian way of saying that someone now swims with the fishes.
Mm.
They're the family's loyal bodyguard had been killed, and this was just a way to let the Corleones know.
I see. And I hope our audience sees how easily I can distract you by asking you about a movie reference.
Yes, you do that quite well.
So anyway.
So, yes, going back to the Corleones. So, yeah, Michael discovers his brother betrayed him to the family's rival. But our story has to do with Felix Favreau. Look it up. He was a president of France. And, okay, so this gentleman's named Felix, and the last name is spelled Faure. He was a president of France in the late 1800s. So, in 1899, one day, while performing some presidential duty in his office, his mistress, Marguerite Steinheil, arrived and performed fellatio on the president.
Was she wearing a blue dress?
I think that's another president you're thinking of.
Was there a cigar involved?
You bet your life. In a manner of speaking, yes. Yes. So, so she arrived and performed fellatio on the president. Now, while performing her presidential duty, legend has it that the president had a seizure and died.
Ooh.
That part of it is true. So, again, legend says that, Madame was, basically found kneeling in front of him.
Saying a final prayer of goodbye?
Yeah, I'm sure that's what it was. Probably praying. Praying not to be caught. Who knows? But then people, surprisingly, began to make fun. And this was known as the kiss of death.
Oh, how cool is that?
Yes. Now, America, not to be outdone by the French, has Nelson Rockefeller, Vice President of the United States under Gerald Ford, figuratively speaking. So the Mr. Rockefeller was 71 years old, and he was working late on a project on a Saturday night. I guess all the offices at Rockefeller Center were closed during the week or something. And he was there with his 27-year-old assistant.
Assistant of what?
Yes, to assist him on the late night project.
I see.
Yes. So, long story short, the young lady was pinned down under the former vice president.
Oh.
But finally managed to call the paramedics.
Oh, he died while he was on top of her?
Yes.
Well, why didn't you just say that?
I was trying to be delicate, but really, what would be the point of that? So, yes, basically, he died naked, butt naked on top of her. And she was pinned under him.
That poor child.
Yeah. But did finally manage to call paramedics.
I'm surprised she could breathe.
So, you're right. I mean, that was literally dead weight.
Yeah.
So
thus the term.
He
Wow.
Yes. It was surprising he didn't squish her like a bug.
Oh my goodness. I bet you she was traumatized after that.
I'm traumatized just trying to get through this. So So in the end, the New York Times, in their lengthy obit of Mr. Rockefeller, the New York Times wrote that Rockefeller, quote, died the way he lived. So you can interpret that any way you wish. Please send in your stories about dying during sex for our ongoing segment on In Flagrante Delicto Morto to email info@everyonedies.org. Everyonedies.org, 1 is the number. So, or snail mail, P.O. Box 851891, Yukon, Oklahoma 73085.
Thanks, Charlie. Now you've really given me something to think about. We are developing an ongoing segment called I Won't Be Caught Dead Wearing That. And we would really like you guys to send us pictures along with the story behind your picture of what you were wearing that made you say, I wouldn't be caught dead wearing that, but you wore it anyway. I recently, Juliana's beginning the interview. She's graduating from nursing school. And so she wanted to go shopping for an interview outfit. And I was telling her about this segment. She says, well, you can take a picture of me in this suit because I would have said I wouldn't be caught dead wearing this. So there you have it. You can be any age and say that. We are going to discuss these on an upcoming podcast, and the winner will receive an Everyone Dies t-shirt. So we have t-shirts? Not yet, but we will by the time somebody sends us something. Okay. So send us your stories with your pictures to email it's info, INFO, at everyonedies.org. It's EVERY, the number 1, DIES, all one word, .org. Snail mail, P.O. Box 851891, Yukon, Oklahoma 73085. Facebook, Everyone Dies, all one word, EVERY, the number 1, DIES. Our webpage, everyonedies.org. EVERY, the number 1, DIES.org. Or on Twitter at Everyone Dies, with the 1 being the number 1. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for future episodes of Everyone Dies. Our thanks to our CEO, retired Major General David, our producer Sandy, John, our technical advisor, and our family and friends who are helping make this podcast a reality. This is Charlie Navarrette. And I'm Marianne Matzo. And we look forward to talking with you soon. Have a good week.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.